The NFL season is already a quarter of the way through, which means if you're at the bottom of your league, it's time to start making some moves. We're talking week 5 waiver wire targets right here, right now. You won't want to miss this. What is up, y'all? Dr. Derek Bennett, Professor Locks here, and we're here talking about fantasy football week 5 waiver wire targets. That is it, folks. As you know, I do this show every week, Sunday night, kind of leading into the Sunday night football game. The first couple slates have already taken place. We've already seen a couple of guys make major moves, a couple guys that have been kind of laying in the weeds early on this fantasy football season. But we're here talking week 5 waiver additions. And, the fantasy season isn't quite as long as the NFL regular season is. By the time we get to week 13, 14, it's playoff time. So we have to start making moves a little bit quicker to make sure we set ourselves up for a deep playoff race. And as usual, we'll be talking, my top 5 week waiver wire additions. And we'll be talking about just a few guys on the offensive side of the ball that might be, pretty major when it comes to the injury side of things. So a couple of guys went down today that in most cases were probably in your starting lineups or in somebody's starting lineup in your league. But like I said, there were a few guys that absolutely went bonkers today in the fantasy football realm. So Ashton Genty finally popped off and showed that he is that generational type of talent at the running back position, having 33 and a half points in a full PPR style league. He had a couple touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes finally returned. That Chiefs offense looked like the Chiefs offense of old. I think he threw for 4 touchdowns, scored 27 fantasy points. And then one of my favorite players going into this season was Puka Nacua, and he absolutely went haywire today against the Indianapolis Colts. Scored 36 fantasy points, again, full PPR, 13 catches, 170 yards, and a touchdown. He had himself a day. But we're not here to talk about guys that, may or may not be on your fantasy team. We're talking about guys that you might want to add to help boost your team, either into this next week or moving forward. So let's get off and running here. We're going to start with a couple running backs. I got a couple wide receivers for y'all, a tight end that you won't want to miss. And then, as always, I like to throw out one defense that I'm kind of keying in on moving into week 5 if you're just skating by waiver wire wise week to week to fill that defense and special team spot. And then we'll talk about a few injuries. But let's start off with a guy that just seems to be gaining some traction down there in Houston, and that's Woody Marks, the running back out of USC. Woody Marks had himself a little bit of a day. He had 27.9 points in full PPR in week 4. He had 17 carries, 69 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. He also brought in 4 receptions for another 50 yards and a second touchdown through the air. Woody Marks just seems to be a difference maker in that Houston Texans offense. Once Joe Mixon, kind of went down, I guess you could say went down in training camp, never really even started training camp. They brought in Nick Chubb in the offseason. He hasn't necessarily worked out, but Woody Marks has been the guy that has started to gain more steam. He outrushed Nick Chubb by quite a large margin today. He's gotten more touches each week this season. But this is a guy that, through the air, just seems to give that Texans offense a little bit of an extra extra boost, and they absolutely blew out Tennessee today, and therefore he had 17 total carries. But I think that they're going to need him again next week, going up against a pretty tough Baltimore Ravens team that themselves, give up quite a few yards on the ground. That Baltimore Ravens team, for whatever reason, has been struggling on defense early on in the season. So Woody Marks is a guy that I think is definitely worth an add. I would not be surprised moving forward if he continues to be that leading back for the Houston Texans. Another guy that just kind of, I guess, continues to get more carries for one reason or another. But let's go down to New Orleans and talk about Kendra Miller. Kendra Miller is a third year back that has been dealing with some injuries the first couple of seasons, and just hasn't necessarily been super involved with the offense over the last couple of years. But he's starting to gain more traction down there in New Orleans. He hasn't outrushed or gotten the same amount of carries as Kamara has, but each week he's gotten more touches. This week he did have 11 carries for 65 yards. He did find the end zone for the first time this season. But Kamara just he struggled. He has been over the last couple of weeks, and I wouldn't be surprised if, whether it's more injury related or if it's just Kamara starting to wear down with the amount of carries and touches that he's gotten over the last 2 or 3 seasons. If they start to continue to get Kendra Miller more involved in this offense, I think in general we don't expect a ton from that New Orleans team as a whole. They've looked pretty bad this season, and just to try to keep Kamara's wheels as shiny as they can, I think Kendra Miller will continue to get more touches throughout the season, especially this coming week. They go up against the New York Football Giants down there in New Orleans, and the Giants. We thought that the Giants were going to have a pretty good front seven coming into this season. Well, that hasn't quite been the case for most of the season. The Giants have given up over 150 yards per game on the ground. They're only second to the Buffalo Bills in giving up the most yards per game on the defensive side of the ball. So if New Orleans is going to keep it closer or have the chance at winning, I think it's going to be on the ground, either through Kamara or through Kendra Miller. And like I said, they've started to spell Kamara quite a bit and give Miller more touches. So Kendra Miller is a guy that you might want to take a look at. He's available in pretty much every league out there. So he should be available for all y'all. Shifting gears a little bit outside of the running back room, let's talk about wide receivers. And we had a pretty massive injury today, or it seems like it's going to be a pretty massive injury. I'll talk about Malik Neighbors here in a little bit. But, Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton are both guys that I would target. Now, I included Darius Slayton in my top 5 just because he was available in I think it was like 90% of leagues when I looked before recording this. Wan'Dale Robinson is right there around the 50% mark. So my criteria that they have to be available in under or over 50% of leagues, and just depending on how you do your fantasy, which system you go off of, he may or may not be under or over that 50% mark. So I included Darius Slayton. If Wan'Dale Robinson's out there, he would be the guy that I would definitely target over Slayton, but Slayton's available in more leagues. So with Neighbors going down with that knee injury, it sounds like it's going to be an ACL. He's going to get an MRI tomorrow to confirm or deny that. But Slayton's a guy that has been in that Giants offense for a few years now. Didn't have a great day today, but in general, he's going to have more targets coming his way. He had 4 targets today. He caught 3 of them for 44 yards. Not bad, especially with a rookie quarterback. Their game plan as a whole was pretty conservative. And just game script wise, the Giants were running the ball quite a bit, and Scatterbo had a pretty good day. But this New York Giants team as a whole hasn't been super consistent on offense. And in most cases, most game scripts are going to lead them to have to throw the ball. And, without Malik Neighbors there are going to be, another 90 targets available throughout the rest of the season if he is uh, out the rest of the year. So Dart did look pretty impressive in his first game, although it was a pretty conservative game plan. But I think as a whole, this team is probably going to be down and trailing in most games, and that's going to lead them to have to throw the ball. And whether it's Wan'Dale Robinson that you're trying to get, or Darius Slayton, they're both going to start getting more looks from Jackson Dart. So Darius Slayton is a guy going up against the New Orleans Saints this coming week that I think has a great matchup as a whole. The Saints are not one of the best defenses in the league. They haven't been awful, but they're still giving up over 200 yards through the air each week. And I think that's going to be a close one, going down there to New Orleans against the Saints for the Giants. So Darius Slayton or Wan'Dale Robinson, if Robinson's available, grab him. But if not, Slayton would definitely be a good add just because of the amount of targets that are now available without Malik Neighbors. Moving on is a guy that hasn't played yet. As you know, this episode is going to come out Monday morning, and this guy plays on Monday Night Football. But Troy Franklin for the Denver Broncos, he made my list a couple of weeks ago, and he's still available in about 55-60% of leagues out there. And for whatever reason, he shouldn't be. He should be moving up on a lot of people's boards. And when it comes to this Denver Broncos offense, I really expected to have Evan Ingram kind of be that second leading receiver, getting a lot of targets. But that hasn't been the case. Troy Franklin and Bo Nix have continued their relationship after their Oregon days, and Troy Franklin is kind of that second receiver behind Sutton at this point. Now tomorrow, or tonight, whenever you're listening to this, he will be going up against a pretty sad Cincinnati Bengals passing defense. So I wouldn't be surprised if Troy Franklin goes absolutely berserk, puts up a ton of points, and is probably the number one wide receiver in coming off of waivers this coming week. Now he's got a pretty tough matchup in week 5 against Philly in Philadelphia. But I think as a whole, that Philly secondary is still pretty questionable, especially their cornerback 2 spot. And that's who Troy Franklin would be matching up against. So going to Philly, Philly, for whatever reason, they have the black magic this season after winning the Super Bowl. It seems like everything's going their way. And if that's the case, and they get up to an early start, and get off to an early lead, that's going to lead Bo Nix and that Denver Broncos team to throw the ball. And Troy Franklin, like I said, has been getting plenty of targets, and he's been bringing in most of those and doing something with them. So Troy Franklin is a guy that I would definitely be looking out for going into week 5, especially if you're trying to either fill in for a guy that is or for a team or a guy that is on a bye. We have a few teams on bye in week 5. Let me see here. In week 5, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, we have the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, and Atlanta Falcons all on bye. So if you have a wide receiver from those 4 teams, you may want to be looking towards a Troy Franklin. Or if you have a Malik Neighbors that just went down with a serious knee injury, you'll need a guy to fill in for him as well. But let's get out of the wide receiver room. I got one tight end that has started to impress me over the last couple of weeks. He's been getting a lot more targets, and that's Brenton Strange down there in Jacksonville. He had a pretty good game today, bringing in 6 catches for 45 yards on 7 targets. He's available in almost 80 leagues, and for whatever reason, Trevor Lawrence has started to look his way quite frequently over the last couple of weeks. He's had 7 targets each week. He's brought in 6 of them in week 3 and week 4. And in week 5, they're going up against a Chiefs offense, or a Chiefs defense, that just gave up 7 catches to Mark Andrews. So I think as a whole, the Chiefs defense usually locks down wide receivers pretty well. And over the last couple of years, they've kind of struggled against the tight end position. And that's where I think Brenton Strange might be a great option, especially going into week 5, just because of the matchup. Plus, like I said, Trevor Lawrence has been looking his way early and often over there in Jacksonville. So Brenton Strange is a guy that I would be looking to add going into week 5 at the tight end position. And that wraps up my top 5 waiver wire targets going into week 5. But like I said, I usually like to throw out one defense and special teams unit that just has either a great matchup or a team that I'm looking to add if I'm trying to go week to week, picking up defenses just based on matchup. But this past week, holy smokes, and really all 4 weeks, the Tennessee Titans offense has not looked great. Cam Ward, I think he's a special talent. I think he's going to be a starter in this league for quite a while, but he has nobody to throw to. And that offense as a whole hasn't been helping him out. They just got shut out today against the Texans, and they're going up against an Arizona Cardinals team that overall has had a really solid defense. Their offense hasn't been super electric, but their defense is pretty stout, especially from a running defense standpoint. They have a top 10 rush defense at this point, and the Titans have only managed to get about 210 and a half yards per game on offense. They're by far the worst offense in the league through 4 weeks. So if you are looking to add a defense or special teams, the Arizona Cardinals are available in around 70% of leagues to add. And going up against the Tennessee offense, the Cardinals defense has a really good matchup, especially at home in that 4:00 window. So I might be looking for a Cardinals team to add to that defense. And that's it in terms of waiver wire targets. But like I said, I usually like to talk about a few major offensive injuries that are super fantasy relevant for us fantasy nerds. So here's my 2 early injury rundown. And this week is pretty short. I just have a few guys that I want to talk about. But the first one, I've already mentioned it quite a few times, and that's Malik Neighbors going down pretty early in that game today against who did the Chargers. The Chargers. He came down with a pretty brutal knee injury. He did end up getting carted off into the locker room. It is expected that he tore his ACL, and if that's the case, he will be done for the remainder of the season. Luckily for him, it's still September. So timeline-wise, being a doctor of physical therapy, this is what I specialize in. He should be perfectly fine to get rolling again next season in training camp. Now, he's a guy that I don't necessarily know if I would be targeting in the first or second round next year. He's still going to be the number one wide receiver there in New York, and most likely, unless they make some sort of big time move in the offseason. But just knowing ACL tears and kind of the history of them, usually guys coming off of an ACL tear really struggle productivity wise, especially early on after that ACL tear. So the first 6, 8, 10 weeks, I fully expect Malik Neighbors to have a production dip in the 2026 season. Assuming that everything is as expected, and he did tear that ACL. So Malik Neighbors, I expect him to be ready for 2026. I don't expect him to be at the explosive number one wide receiver that we expect out of him, especially early on in that season. But moving off of Malik Neighbors, I don't expect him to be back for the remainder of the season. But Lamar Jackson is another one that went down later on in the game against the Chiefs today with a hamstring injury. With Lamar Jackson and the way that he plays, I think it's a little bit bigger deal having that hamstring strain than with a lot of quarterbacks. Now, I would not be surprised if he missed one game, maybe two. We definitely need to continue to look out for more reports to see how severe this hamstring strain is. Hamstring strains are super annoying and super brutal to come back from in season, because it's an injury that will start to feel better probably by the end of this week. And the way that Lamar Jackson likes to create space, create time, just run the ball as a whole from the quarterback position, that hamstring, even though it might feel better towards the end of this week, it may not physically be better. Again, kind of depending on the severity of the injury. So I would not be surprised if he misses a week, potentially a couple weeks, but it all depends on the severity of the injury. We've seen guys like George Kittle have a hamstring injury in week 1. He was put on the IR. He's going to miss at least 4 weeks. But with Lamar Jackson, as important as he is to that Baltimore Ravens offense, I don't know if he's going to necessarily get placed on the IR unless this is a pretty severe hamstring strain. Could he play next week? Potentially, but I think this is probably a week, maybe 2 weeks on the bench. Let that hamstring heal up. Now, with the Ravens starting off 1-3 at this point, they're going to want to have him back as soon as possible. So, again, could he play this week? Potentially. I expect him to miss 1 week, but it all depends on severity. So, for Lamar Jackson, we just have to continue to look at reports coming out of Baltimore and figure out exactly what their timeline is for him to return. And then finally, I want to talk about a big guy on the offensive line that, we don't necessarily talk about offensive linemen a ton when it comes to fantasy football, but Joe Alt is a massive, massive loss for that Chargers team. He went down with a high ankle sprain pretty early in the game today. I believe it was still in the first quarter. High ankle sprains require a ton of force being put into them to injure that ligament as a whole. It's not the same as a low ankle sprain. It's usually a little bit more severe. A little more time is missed. So I would expect Joe Alt to be out for a few weeks now. Joe Alt is a big, tough guy along that offensive line, and especially with Rashawn Slater going down with an injury in training camp, they definitely need Joe Alt on the left side of that offensive line. Although Omarion Hampton had himself a pretty good day. I think he had 12 carries for 120 some yards and a touchdown against the Giants. Most of that came off of 154 or 55-yard run. But still, I think Joe Alt being on the left side of that offense will definitely help the rookie running back as well as Justin Herbert continue the success that they've had early on in this season. So just wanted to throw out the Joe Alt injury just to make you aware of that and potentially that Chargers offense could have a little bit of a tick down moving forward with him being out probably a month or so. 3 to 4 weeks is what I would guess for Joe Alt in that high ankle sprain. And that's it for this week 5 waiver wires show here at IDP Plus. Yes, we specialize in defensive fantasy content, but we talk offense occasionally. Please like, subscribe, follow the channel. We're throwing out all kinds of content, especially on the defensive side, but also on the offensive side for you fantasy nerds out there. I'm also over on the Daily Fantasy Statement Games Plus, DFSG Plus channel. Me and my buddy Doc, the DGen Doc, Sebastian Fearon, every Wednesday or Tuesday and Wednesday night. Tuesday nights, we're talking college football, pick 'em games. So we usually pick at least 6, sometimes a couple extra college games. And then we talk about NFL games that we really like on Wednesday night, along with some props. So check us out over at DFSG Plus. And as always, here at IDP Plus, we're trying to make you as informed as possible when it comes to fantasy football. That's it. I think we're good here. I do this waiver wire show every Sunday night. If you like the guys that I'm throwing out, tell me down in the comments. If there's somebody that you're looking to target, throw it down in the comments. I like the feedback. I like to chop shop down in the comments. So until further notice, I will be back on Monday after week 5 talking waiver wires for the week 6. But until then, I'm out.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.